Rawalpindi moves with a rhythm of its own, busy, loud, alive. But within this ordinary chaos lived a woman quietly shaping her dreams. At 26, Sana Yousaf carried ambition in her eyes and determination in every step. Yet, somewhere behind these familiar streets, a storm was forming. A storm she didn't see coming. A storm fueled by ego, obsession, and a simple refusal that would change everything. Her phone was the first clue, broken, abandoned, and silent. A device that once carried her dreams, her work, her connections, now lay shattered on cold concrete. Investigators didn't see just a phone, they saw a starting point, a beginning. Because every crack, every fragment, every silence leads somewhere. And in Sana's case, it led to a truth darker than anyone expected. At dawn, a jogger paused beside a forgotten corner of a construction site. Something didn't belong. A handbag, half open. A scarf buried under dust. And within minutes, the quiet morning transformed into a crime scene. What lay hidden behind those concrete slabs would unfold into one of the most haunting cases the city had seen, a life stolen, a silence broken, and a trail waiting to be uncovered. Sana was a builder in her own right, a creator of opportunities, a believer in growth. Her small home office witnessed countless late nights and quiet victories. But with success came attention, and with attention came danger. A danger she didn't invite, didn't encourage, and never deserved. Her only mistake was being seen by the wrong person, someone who confused admiration with possession. Some dangers announce themselves. Others hide in plain sight. A dark vehicle watching from a distance. Tinted windows concealing intentions. The kind of presence that feels accidental at first, then unsettling, then unavoidable. For Sana, this silent shadow soon became a recurring pattern, one she brushed aside, unaware of the storm quietly circling her life, waiting for the right moment to strike. CCTV footage captured more than movement, it captured obsession. A silver Mehran leaving the station, and behind it, a black SUV creeping forward, keeping perfect distance. No horns, no rush, no mistakes. Just quiet tracking. Investigators later realized this was no coincidence. This was surveillance. This was preparation. This was the first recorded moment where Sana's fate began to shift. Her scarf told a story, one of struggle, silence, and sudden interruption. Left behind not by accident, but by urgency. It became one of the earliest pieces of evidence, a trace of her presence in a place she was never meant to be. An object so ordinary, yet so powerful, guiding investigators toward the truth of what happened in her final hours. Behind polished reputations often lie darker truths. Hidden debts, quiet deals, money flowing in circles designed to deceive. Irfan Malik's life wasn't built on success, it was built on illusion. And every illusion demands control. When Sana refused him, his fragile empire cracked. What followed wasn't heartbreak. It was retaliation born from entitlement, threaded through financial motives investigators would later uncover in disturbing detail. Every case begins with questions. Some answers come easily, others resist. But nothing about Sana's case was simple. Every file, every testimony, every timestamp revealed layers of planning. There were no coincidences, only choices. And as investigators pieced together her final hours, one truth became unavoidable: this wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate act fueled by pride, resentment, and a refusal turned deadly. The road Sana traveled that day was routine, familiar turns, predictable landmarks, safe spaces. But even the safest paths can become traps when someone watches your every move. As she headed toward her meeting, she didn't know her route wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to the men following her. To the plan unfolding behind her. To the silent storm waiting at the end of the road. Before tragedy entered her life, Sana lived in a world defined by creativity, structure, and ambition. Her desk told her story better than any witness ever could, a place where ideas were born and deadlines were conquered. She wasn't wealthy or connected, but she was persistent, and persistence can be powerful. Yet with every step she took forward, someone else watched from a distance, misinterpreting her confidence as defiance and her independence as rejection. This small desk symbolized who Sana truly was, a young woman carving her future with her own hands, unaware that another set of hands, miles away, had already decided she didn't deserve that freedom. In the end, the things that made her remarkable, her strength, her clarity, her refusal to be controlled, became the very thing someone tried to destroy. The unfinished commercial building stood vacant, ignored by most, forgotten by many. But on the day Sana disappeared, it became the silent witness to a crime that shook an entire city. Investigators later discovered trace evidence, dust patterns, broken fibers, and faint streaks on the floor, that revealed the horrifying truth of what happened inside. This structure, incomplete and abandoned, served as the perfect backdrop for men who sought isolation and secrecy. It wasn't chosen randomly. It was chosen because no one would hear, no one would interrupt, and no one would question the quiet hours spent within its walls. For Sana, it became the place where her voice was taken, her choices erased. And for investigators, it became the place where her story was finally understood. Rope fibers are small, fragile, and ordinary. But in forensic investigations, they speak louder than most witnesses. The fibers found near Sana's wrists told a story of resistance, of a struggle she didn't surrender to easily. Each strand revealed pressure, movement, and the desperate attempts of someone fighting for life. When analysts compared the fibers to items recovered from Irfan's warehouse, the match was undeniable. What seemed like tiny, irrelevant threads became the bridge between suspicion and truth. These fibers proved she wasn't taken quietly. She wasn't overpowered without a fight. They confirmed a reality no family wants to imagine: Sana fought until she couldn't anymore. And those who tied those knots underestimated what a single fiber could reveal. The black Hilux was more than a vehicle, it was a moving piece of evidence, a silent predator slipping through city roads with purpose. For weeks, no one noticed its presence behind Sana's routine routes. But CCTV angles stitched together by investigators revealed its pattern, following her, circling her neighborhood, parking near places she visited. The broken decal on its rear window became the key that unlocked the mystery. When the same mark was found on a Hilux in Irfan's warehouse, denial was no longer an option. This wasn't coincidence. This was preparation. The Hilux carried the men who abducted her, drove her to her final location, and attempted to hide the last moments of her life. But it also carried the truth that would bring them down. Courtrooms often feel lifeless when empty, but they hold the echoes of stories that shaped the lives of countless families. In Sana's case, these walls became the battleground between truth and manipulation. On one side, evidence so meticulously gathered that even silence felt heavy. On the other, attempts to twist the narrative, to turn guilt into misunderstanding and premeditation into misfortune. The files resting on the table contained more than documents, they held timelines, confessions, cell tower pings, financial trails, and every action that culminated in Sana's death. When the trial began, the courtroom transformed into a space where the past was dissected, motive was exposed, and justice slowly made its way toward the truth. A gavel may be small, but in the world of justice, it carries the weight of lives, decisions, and irreversible truths. When the gavel finally struck in Sana's case, it marked the end of a long, grueling battle. One driven by persistence, evidence, and the voices of those who refused to let her story fade. The judgment acknowledged not just a murder, but the motive behind it: pride, obsession, entitlement. Each strike echoed the reality Irfan refused to accept, that his wealth couldn't buy innocence, his influence couldn't erase evidence, and his ego couldn't escape accountability. The verdict wasn't just a sentence. It was a statement, a declaration that a woman's no is not a provocation, not a challenge, and never a justification for violence. Every piece of evidence tells a chapter of a story. In Sana's case, the narrative unfolded through SIM cards that hid late-night threats, call logs that revealed coordination, and USB drives containing deleted files restored through digital forensics. Nothing remained hidden for long. Investigators pieced together the fragments like a puzzle, one that slowly built a picture of obsession, control, and rage. Each recovered message connected timelines. Each tower ping narrowed suspects. And each erased digital footprint revealed intention. These objects, simple and small, held the power to expose an entire criminal network built on lies. In the end, they didn't just solve a case, they defended a woman who could no longer speak for herself. Behind the headlines, the forensic details, and the courtroom tension lies a quieter story, the story of a home forever changed. Sana's family carries a weight no court can lift. Her mother's hands, steady yet trembling, hold memories of a daughter who once filled the house with laughter, plans, and gentle routines. Now, every corner of the home whispers her absence. The family's strength throughout the case wasn't driven by revenge but by love, by the belief that Sana deserved truth, dignity, and justice. In true crime narratives, families often become the unnoticed heroes, fighting battles the world never sees. And in this home, surrounded by her photos, the real cost of the tragedy becomes painfully clear. Forensic labs turn silence into testimony. Dust becomes a timeline. Scratches become clues. Fibers become witnesses. In Sana's case, science filled the gaps that human eyes couldn't. Analysts examined every trace, soil particles, hair fragments, impact marks, building an unbroken chain that led straight to the suspects. The lab became the voice Sana no longer had, transforming microscopic details into undeniable truths. It proved that even in their attempt to hide their tracks, the killers overlooked the one thing they couldn't control: evidence doesn't lie. Ego hides in shadows long before it steps into the light. Irfan Malik lived a life surrounded by wealth, influence, and the illusion of power. But behind that facade was a man crumbling, financially unstable, desperate for validation, and threatened by the independence of a woman who owed him nothing. His rejection wasn't romantic disappointment. It was an attack on the identity he built on entitlement. And in his world, saying no wasn't just defiance, it was betrayal. His silhouette became the shape of a predator who mistook control for love. But once the truth emerged, that silhouette became the outline of a criminal, stripped of influence and finally seen for what he truly was. Time stopped for Sana long before investigators discovered her body. The smashed wristwatch found near the construction site froze at 4:16 p.m., a chilling symbol of her final struggle. Investigators believe it was the moment her life ended, marking a silent timestamp of violence. This small object became one of the most powerful pieces of evidence, capturing not just time, but truth. It illustrated the abruptness of her final moments, the cruelty of the attack, and the precise window when her killers panicked. A broken watch, overlooked by her attackers, became a frozen witness to the unforgiving truth. Crime doesn't begin with violence. It begins with decisions, small, unethical, consequence-free decisions. For Irfan, it began with money exchanging hands in dark corners, whispered instructions, and promises of silence. The men hired to stalk and intimidate Sana weren't criminals by chance, they were chosen for their willingness to obey without asking questions. But every transaction leaves a trail. And when financial investigators uncovered the movement of cash through unregistered loans, everything unraveled. These envelopes, exchanged in secrecy, became the evidence that exposed premeditation, coordination, and a crime rooted not in emotion but in calculated intent. A shadow is temporary, but the impact of a life echoes far beyond its physical presence. Sana's story became more than a case, it became a reminder of the silent battles women face every day. The cracked pavement beneath her shadow represents the fractures in society that allow entitlement to grow unchecked. She wasn't targeted because she was weak. She was targeted because she was strong, independent, and unwilling to surrender her choices. In the aftermath of her tragedy, her shadow lives on, not as a symbol of fear, but of resilience, inspiring families, investigators, and ordinary citizens to demand better protection for those who dare to say no. When the case reached the public eye, the hallways outside the courtroom turned into arenas of scrutiny and speculation. Journalists carried notebooks filled with timelines, quotes, and reactions, each headline shaping public awareness. But beyond the noise, what mattered was the truth emerging inside the courtroom. Every testimony added weight to Sana's story, every exhibit dismantled the defense, and every revelation brought her family one step closer to closure. These hallways witnessed the tension of a nation watching justice unfold. The police lineup brought faces into the frame, faces tied to the darkest hours of Sana's final day. Standing in silence, their silhouettes told more than their expressions ever could. They were part of a chain, each man contributing to a narrative of fear, coercion, and violence. Witnesses identified them one by one, and the investigation gained momentum. Their presence in that lineup marked the moment speculation turned into recognition, and recognition into accountability. CCTV footage rarely lies. Grainy, imperfect, sometimes blurry, but always revealing. This still became one of the most significant breakthroughs in the investigation. The timestamp, faint yet visible, placed the Hilux exactly where Sana was last seen alive. Investigators followed its path across multiple cameras, mapping its movements like a trail of digital breadcrumbs. Each frame tightened the noose around the suspects, proving that even in the deadliest plans, technology leaves shadows that criminals cannot escape. Memorials are more than gatherings, they are echoes of the lives taken too soon. In Sana's case, candles flickered not just for sorrow but for justice. Each flower placed near her portrait carried the weight of grief and the determination of a community unwilling to forget her. Her story ignited conversations about safety, entitlement, and the value of a woman's autonomy. In the gentle glow of candles, her memory stands tall, reminding the world that her voice, though silenced, continues to shape change. An empty desk tells the story of work interrupted, dreams paused not by choice but by tragedy. Sana's desk, once filled with plans, proposals, and quiet determination, now stands as a reminder of what could have been. Her unfinished tasks reflect a future she deserved but never reached. The faint moonlight slipping through the blinds symbolizes the hope that survives even in loss. Her story, though heartbreaking, became a catalyst for awareness and action. And in that quiet room, her legacy continues, a legacy of courage, independence, and the right to say no without fear.